The stars around Sanctuary Station were not kind. They were smeared into a permanent, swirling fog of color, the Azure Nebula. For the scientists there, it was a beautiful mystery to study. For everyone else, it was a lonely, gray posting at the very edge of known space. The station itself was not built for war. It was a collection of rounded modules and large observation domes, clinging together like metal bubbles. Inside, 300 humans worked alongside 100 Selvans. The Selvans were quiet, thoughtful beings with soft, blue skin and large, dark eyes. They were experts in growing things. Together, they studied how life might begin in places just like the nebula. Lee was the station commander. He sat in his small office, looking at a screen. The lines on his face seemed deeper today. The news from the wider galaxy was bad. Two powerful empires were fighting far away. It was a conflict about trade and territory, things Sanctuary had no part in. "We are neutral," Lee said to himself, reading the latest update. "We have no weapons. We are no threat." His quiet words were swallowed by a sudden, sharp alarm. The station lights flashed red. A vibration, deep and wrong, shook the floor. Lee ran to the command center. People were already at their stations, their faces tight with fear. On the main screen, objects blinked into existence at the edge of their sensors. They were angular and sharp, unlike any research vessel. Their identification codes flashed. "Kaith." "Open a channel," Lee said, his voice steady. "Broadcast our peaceful designation. Use the universal code." Mina, the head of life support, listened from her station in engineering. Her hands moved quickly over her own controls, checking the stress on the station's hull. She was a practical woman, focused on air, water, and heat, problems she could fix. The communication officer spoke, her voice trembling. "They are not responding, Commander. They are powering weapons." Before Lee could say another word, the station lurched. A sound of tearing metal screamed through the corridors. The lights died for a second before the emergency strips flickered on, painting everything in dull red. "Direct hit on the outer docking ring," someone yelled. Lee gripped the console. "Evasive pattern. Get us behind the nebula's dust cloud. And keep trying to talk to them." But the Kaith ships did not want to talk. They moved with a cold, mechanical precision. Sanctuary Station was a pebble in their path. Another impact rocked the station. A warning flashed on Mina's screen. The primary oxygen processor was damaged. In the Xenobotany lab, GA was trying to calm the Selvans. The plants in their climate-controlled rooms trembled. An elderly Selvan, their custodian, stood perfectly still. His large eyes were closed. "The Kaith," Gia said, helping a younger Selvan to her feet. "They must think we're a military outpost. This is a mistake." The custodian opened his eyes. "They are not asking questions, child. This is no mistake. It is a clearing." Deep in a maintenance shaft, June felt the impact through the metal grating. He was the station's best comms technician, a man who preferred circuits to conversations. He had been patching a relay when the attack started. Now he crawled toward the main communications array. The station's official channels were a storm of shouting and static, distress calls, military frequencies, diplomatic pleas. All of it was met with the same grinding noise. A jamming field. The Kaith were silencing them. Back in command, Lee watched a screen go dark. "They took out the long-range antenna. We can't call for help. The nearest patrol is weeks away," his second-in-command said softly. "Even if they heard us." A new message appeared on Lee's private screen. It was from the Unified Galactic Council. He opened it. The words were clean, formal, and utterly cold. Sector 7 Azure declared untenable. All Council assets in Sector are considered non-retrievable. No aid will be forthcoming. Prioritize survival by any means necessary. Lee read it twice. Non retrievable. No aid will be forthcoming. It was not just a statement. It was an order to die quietly. He turned to his crew. The red light washed over their hopeful, terrified faces. They were waiting for him to tell them help was coming. He straightened his jacket. The Kaith jamming is total, he said, his voice loud in the quiet room. And we have just received orders from the council. They have written this sector off. He took a breath. No aid is coming. We are on our own. The silence that followed was heavier than the metal of the station. The only sound was the distant groan of stressed hull plates. Another blast hit, closer this time. The main lights died completely. In the darkness, lit only by flashing alerts, Mina's voice came over the engineering channel. It was calm, but it carried a finality that made everyone's blood run cold. "Commander Lee," she said, "that was the main reactor. Containment is failing. I can keep it stable for maybe 48 hours. No more. After that, we lose power, heat, and air. 48 hours. Lee looked at the faces around him. 400 souls. Scientists, gardeners, engineers, children, and enough escape pods for maybe 200. The war had found them. And the galaxy had already forgotten them. The weight of the news settled over Sanctuary Station like a physical thing. The air in the command center felt thick and hard to breathe. Commander Lee's words, "No aid is coming," echoed in the silence between the groans of the dying station. Lee knew he had to move. He opened the station-wide channel. His voice was tired, but clear. "All personnel. This is the commander. Report to your designated emergency pods. Families with children under 16 go first. Selvan researchers go with them. Everyone else, stand by." He closed the channel. He knew it was not enough. There were not enough pods. He looked at his second-in-command, a woman named Sumin. "Prepare the lottery system," he said quietly, "for the remaining seats." "A lottery?" Sumin asked, her eyes wide. "It is the only way that is fair," Lee said, but the words tasted bitter. The news spread. In the corridors, people stopped running and began to walk slowly. They looked at each other, realizing that a neighbor, a friend, a coworker would not be getting on a pod. In the main greenhouse, GA helped the Selvans gather their most precious plant samples. The young Selvans were scared, their breathing quick and shallow. The custodian placed a gentle, three-fingered hand on Jay's arm. "There is no room for all of us, is there?" he asked, his voice a soft whisper that Jay could not lie. "No. Not on the pods." The custodian nodded. "Then we will make room. My people will not take seats from your young." "No," Jay said, her eyes filling with tears. "We can't accept that." "It is not your choice," the custodian said calmly. "It is ours. To bloom in the dark is the truest form of life. We will help those who leave to prepare. We will stay, and we will bloom." In engineering, Mina ignored the orders. She did not go to a pod. She stayed at her station, her fingers flying over the controls. She rerouted power from non-essential modules. She sealed off sections of the station that were losing air. Her mind worked on a single problem, stretching 48 hours of air into 50. Into 55. Every minute counted. "What are you doing?" a young engineer asked her. "You should go. You have a pod assignment." "My assignment is here," Mina said, not looking up. "More air for them means more time for the pods to get clear. Now go. Help people get strapped in." Deep in the maintenance shafts, June was also ignoring the orders. The lottery meant nothing to him. His pod assignment meant nothing. He had one job left. He crawled through the dark, hot duct. Pulling himself toward the smashed main communications array, he reached it. The panel was blackened. Wires hung like dead vines. But June knew the system better than he knew his own hands. The official transmitters were gone. But there were backups. Old systems. Forgotten lines. He pulled a small tool from his belt and began to work. His world shrank to the colored wires in his hand. The station could be falling apart around him, but here, he had a problem he could solve. He found it. A secondary emitter. It was weak. It was designed for short-range, ship-to-ship chatter. It was also very, very old. It used a frequency band from the early human mining guilds. A band no one had used in 100 years. It was a ghost channel. But the Kaith jamming was powerful and modern. It blocked everything. June listened on his headset. It was all noise. But then he heard it. Tiny gap. Pattern. The jamming signal was not perfect. It shifted every few minutes to adapt, and for a fraction of a second, in one narrow band, there was a hole. It was a one-way window. You could maybe push a whisper through, but you could not hear a reply. June thought of Commander Lee's face. No aid is coming. He thought of the Selvan children. He thought of Mina, fighting for every breath of air. He connected his personal pad to the old emitter. He did not have time for a long message. He typed the station's coordinates. He typed their status. Reactor breach. For 100 souls. Kaith siege. He needed one more word. One word to say who they were. He typed. Sanctuary. He set the message to repeat. A tiny data packet shorter than a single heartbeat. He aimed the weak, old emitter at the hole in the jamming field. He pressed send. The message vanished into the void. He had no way of knowing if it got through. He adjusted the frequency, chasing the shifting gap in the noise. He sent it again and again. A prayer on a forgotten frequency, thrown into a silent, uncaring universe. Back in the command center, Lee looked at the list of names. The lottery was ready. People were gathering by the pod bays, their faces pale. Some were crying quietly. Others held each other. Sumin approached him. The Selvan custodian has informed his people they will not be taking any pod seats. They are giving them all to us. Lee closed his eyes. The kindness felt like a knife. We cannot accept. They insist, Sumin said. They are already helping people board. Lee nodded, unable to speak. The galaxy had abandoned them. But here, in this dark, cold place, people were giving away their only chance at life for strangers. It was the most human, and the most alien thing he had ever seen. He looked at the countdown on the main screen. 42 hours of air left. The Kaith ships were still out there, watching, a silent ring of metal and death. Somewhere in the station, a child was singing a quiet song to herself. Somewhere else, June sent his whisper into the dark. And in the greenhouse, the custodian gently watered his plants, tending to life while he waited for the end. The final hours on Sanctuary Station were quiet. The frantic fear was gone, replaced by a heavy, tired calm. People moved slowly, like they were underwater. In the pod bays, the last goodbyes were happening. A mother knelt, holding her young son's face. Be brave for your sister. Listen to Aunt Mina on the pod. I will see you soon. She hugged him tightly before gently pushing him toward the open hatch. She did not look away as the hatch closed. Ga stood with the Selvan custodian and a group of his people. They had not boarded a single pod. They stood together, a quiet cluster of blue in the harsh red light. A's face was wet. I will stay with you, she said, her voice breaking. The custodian shook his head. No, little Bloom. You must go. You must tell them how we lived, not how we ended. That is your task now. He pressed a small data crystal into her hand. Contained all their research, their songs, their stories. Carry us with you. Nearby, Mina was doing a final check on Pod 4. She had stretched the life support to its limit. She turned to find June standing there, his tools still in his belt. June, get in. This pod has a seat. June looked at the floor. My message is still sending. The emitter is in a stable duct. If I leave, it stops. It's an old mining frequency, June. No one is listening. It's just noise in the dark. Maybe, he said, finally looking at her. But it's the only noise we're making that's ours. Not a distress call. Not a plea. Just our name. Sanctuary. He handed her a small device. It's linked to the emitter. You'll know if anyone hears it. The light will turn green. Mina took the device. A small black circle with a single dark LED. She put it in her pocket. Get in the pod, June. He shook his head and took a step back. Good luck, Mina. Then he turned and walked away, back into the dark, groaning heart of the station. Mina watched him go. She felt the weight of the device in her pocket. She got into the pod and sealed the hatch. Commander Lee stood on the command deck. It was empty now except for Sumin. The main screen showed the Kaith ships, holding position like wolves around a dying campfire. "It's time, sir," Sumin said softly. Lee nodded. He opened the final channel. "All pods. This is Commander Lee. Launch in sequence. Good luck. It has been an honor." His voice was steady. He closed the channel and looked at Sumin. "You should go to your pod." "With all respect, Commander," she said, standing straight. "My pod left 10 minutes ago. I gave my seat to the Kim boy. He's only 12. Lee looked at her, and for the first time in days, a real, tired smile touched his lips. "Then let's give them a show." On the station's outer hull, hatches blew open. One by one, the blocky escape pods shot out into the void. They were meant for short trips, slow and clumsy. They spread out like seeds thrown into the wind, heading for the thick, glowing gas of the Azure Nebula. It was their only hope to hide. From the command deck, Lee watched them go. His heart ached with pride and sorrow. Then, a new signal flashed on the screen. 2 Kaith scout ships broke away from the main group. Their engines flared. They were moving to intercept the pods. "Those pods are defenseless," Sumin whispered. Lee's hands moved over the controls. Sanctuary Station had no real weapons, but it did have mining lasers used to break up asteroids for research, and it had steering thrusters. "Powering up directional thrusters," Lee said, his voice all business. "Transferring all remaining power from life support." "Sir, that will cut the air for anyone left on board in minutes," Sumin said. "I know," Lee said. He targeted the mining lasers, not at the Kaith ships, but at a large, dense cloud of metallic dust between the scouts and the fleeing pods. He fired. The cloud heated up, glowing hot and bright. It wasn't a weapon. It was a flare, a brilliant, distracting light. "Hey!" Lee yelled over an open frequency, blasting noise at the Kaith. "Look over here. The real fight is with me." The Kaith scouts hesitated. One turned its guns toward the flashing station. Lee fired the station's massive steering thrusters. The entire structure began to turn, slowly, like a wounded giant rising from its bed. He was putting the bulk of the station between the pods and the Kaith guns. "Come on," Lee growled. "Look at me." The lead Kaith scout fired. A bolt of plasma tore into the station's habitat module. The command deck shook violently. Lee was thrown from his chair. Alarms screamed. Sumin helped him up. The main screen was cracked, but they could see it. The pods, tiny specks of light, were reaching the edge of the nebula. They were vanishing into the colorful fog. Lee smiled, blood on his teeth. "They made it." The Kaith scout fired again. This blast hit the command deck directly. The screen went black. All the lights on Sanctuary Station went out. The groaning of metal stopped. The only sound was the quiet hiss of air escaping into space. The station was dark and silent. Out in the nebula, Mina floated in Pod 4. She clutched the device June had given her. The LED was dark. Through the small viewport, she saw the last flash of light as Sanctuary Station died. Then, there was nothing. Just the swirling, empty colors of the nebula and the cold silence of the void. They were alone. Inside Pod 4, the only sounds were the hum of the air recycler and the shaky breaths of its 12 passengers. Mina floated near the small viewport, her face lit by the nebula's slow dance of pink and blue gas. It was beautiful, and it meant they were hidden. But it also felt like a tomb. Ga was strapped into a seat next to a young Selvan female named Ella. Ga held the data crystal the custodian had given her so tightly her knuckles were white. She stared at nothing. "How long can we stay here?" a man named Choi asked. His voice was too loud in the small space. Mina checked her panel. "The air is good for 5 days. Power for 6. But we have no engine. We are drifting. If we drift out of the nebula's edge, the Kaith will see us. So we just wait to suffocate or be found?" Choi said, an edge of panic in his words. "We wait," Mina said firmly. "We wait for the Kaith to leave. Then we can try to use the emergency beacon. Maybe a salvage ship will pass by in a few months." Her words hung in the air. A few months. They had days of air. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time meant nothing in the silent, unchanging fog. People slept fitfully. They shared small sips of water and nutrition bars. They did not talk much. Talking used oxygen. Mina kept checking the device June had given her. The small black circle with its dark LED. It was cold in her hand. She wondered if June had died quickly when the station lost power. She hoped so. On the third day, Ella the Selvan became sick. Her breathing was fast and shallow. Her blue skin looked pale and gray. Jay held her hand, whispering to her, "It will be okay. Just breathe slowly. The air here is thin for us," Ella whispered back. "It is not your fault." Mina checked the pod's atmosphere. For humans, it was fine. For the Selvans, it was barely enough. They needed a different mix. Something she could not create. She looked at Jess' desperate face, then at the sick Selvan. "There is an emergency oxygen tank," Mina said quietly. "It's a pure supply. I can pipe it directly to her. But it will shorten our total air by a full day." Choi heard this. "What? No. That's a day less for all of us. For one alien." I turned to him, her eyes fierce. "Her name is Ella, and she stayed behind so your niece could have a seat on this pod. Remember?" Choi looked at the floor, his face red. "Do it," said an older woman from the back. Others nodded. Mina adjusted the lines, feeding the pure oxygen to Ella. The Selvan's breathing slowly deepened. The gray tone left her skin. No one said thank you. It was just what they did. On the fifth morning, the air began to taste stale. Mina knew they had less than a day left. The nebula outside was thinning. They were drifting toward its outer edge. Soon they would be visible. Then, a shadow moved against the colorful gas. It was a sharp, angular shape. A Kaith scout ship. It was moving slowly, sweeping the area with its sensors. It was hunting. Everyone in the pod froze. No one breathed. The only sound was the frantic beeping of the pod's passive sensor, warning of the nearby vessel. Mina shut it off with a trembling hand. They watched as the scout turned. Its nose was pointing away from them. It began to move off. A wave of relief washed through the pod. Choi put his head in his hands. Then the scout stopped, turned back. It had detected something. A power signature? A heat leak? It moved toward them, deliberate and sure. "It's found us," Mina whispered. The Kaith ship grew larger in the viewport. They could see the details of its cruel, spiked hull. A red light glowed on its underside. A targeting laser. It was painting their pod. This was it. After everything. After Lee's sacrifice. After June's whisper into the dark. They had been found in their hiding place. Ga held Ella close. Mina closed her eyes. She thought of June's device, still dark in her pocket. A useless piece of plastic. A hope that never was. Then, a new sound began. It started as a deep vibration through the hull of the pod. A rumble that they felt in their bones more than heard. Then it grew into a sound. A long, low, and mournful howl. It was the sound of metal tearing in a storm. It was the sound of a deep ocean current moving mountains. It was empty and full of rage all at once. The howl grew louder, shaking everything. The cups and tools in the pod rattled. The light flickered. Outside, the Kaith scout ship stopped. Its targeting laser winked out. It turned sharply, pointing its guns away from the pod, toward the source of the sound. The nebula's gas in front of them began to swirl violently, like water going down a drain. The colors twisted and ripped apart. And then the ship arrived. It did not glide. It did not appear. Tore its way into normal space. It was massive, all sharp angles and heavy armor plate. It was scarred and pitted, with no beautiful lines, only pure function. It was a human warship, but it looked like a giant, angry piece of stone that had been thrown through the void. The terrible howl was the sound of its drive. A sound that should not exist in space. Fading into a deep, menacing hum. It moved with shocking speed, placing its vast, broadside hull directly between the tiny, fragile pod and the Kaith scout. It did not fire. It did not hail them. It just sat there, A silent, immense wall of dark metal, blocking the enemy completely from view. I in Pod 4. Everyone stared. No one spoke. The warship filled the entire viewport. Mina's hand went to her pocket. Her fingers found June's device. She pulled it out. The single LED on its face was glowing a bright, steady, impossible green. Inside Pod 4, the green light was the only color that mattered. Mina stared at it, her breath caught in her throat. June's whisper had been heard. The device felt warm in her hand, a tiny piece of proof that they had not been forgotten. Outside, the silent standoff held. The human warship was a mountain of dark metal. The Kaith Scout looked like a sharp knife next to it. For a long moment, nothing happened. The nebula's gas drifted slowly past the two ships. Then, a light flashed on the Kaith ship. It was sending a signal. A demand. On the bridge of the human warship, Captain Hannah watched the alien message appear on her screen. It was a simple text in the common galactic language. Unknown vessel. You have interfered in a military action. Withdraw. This system is under KHET control. Hannah was not young. Her black hair was streaked with gray, tied back tightly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard. She had seen the message from Sanctuary Station. She had seen the raw data June had sent on the old mining frequency. She had listened to it on a loop for 3 days as her ship, the Vindication, pushed its engines to the breaking point to get here. She did not reply with words. She nodded to her communications officer, a serious young man named Min. Broadcast Package Alpha. Hannah said, her voice quiet. On all frequencies, visual and audio, full power. On the Kaith ship, the crew saw a new data stream hit their system. It was not a weapon. It was video. They opened it. The footage was shaky, taken from Sanctuary Station's internal cameras. It showed the last hours. They saw the rounded corridors full of running people, human and Selvan. They saw children being pulled into rooms by adults. They saw researchers in labs, desperately securing plant samples, not weapons. They saw the Selvan custodian, standing peacefully in the greenhouse, watering his plants as the station shook. There was no sound, but the meaning was clear. These were not soldiers. The footage cut to the command deck. They saw Commander Lee, blood on his face, firing the mining lasers at a dust cloud. They heard his voice, yelling over an open channel, full of furious courage. Hey, look over here. The real fight is with me. They watched him turn the dying station to shield the escaping pods. Then, the screen went dark. The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was only silence between the two ships on the pod. Mina and the others saw none of this. They only saw the back of the huge human ship. They felt a new vibration through the hull. Along the side of the Vindication, dozens of small ports opened. Not gun ports. They glowed with a soft blue light. Then, from each port, a beam of energy shot out. The beams did not go toward the Kaith ship. Instead, they connected with each other, forming a shimmering, brilliant web of light between the warship and the Scout. It was a shield. A fence made of pure energy. A line drawn in the sand of space. The message was not written or spoken. It was simpler. It said, "You shall not pass." On the Kaith Scout, the commander felt a cold feeling. This was not a normal military response. This human did not argue. She did not threaten. She showed them their crime, and then she made a wall. The silence from the human ship was more frightening than any war cry. The Kaith commander checked his sensors. He looked at the energy readings coming from the human ship. The power levels for its main weapons were spiking to levels he had only seen in fleet battleships. Those weapons were still silent, still cold. But they were ready. The entire human vessel was like a coiled spring, humming with terrible power. The human ship was not asking him to leave. It was waiting to see if he would be stupid enough to stay. The Kaith commander was not stupid. He was ruthless, but he understood a losing fight. Attacking this pod now meant a fight with that warship. A fight he would not win. And for what? A few refugees? He made his decision. The Kaith Scout ship's engines glowed. It turned sharply, moving away from the energy web, away from the pod. It accelerated quickly, disappearing back into the thinner gas of the nebula, going to report to its main fleet. On the bridge of the Vindication, Min watched the scout vanish from the scanner. Kate vessel is departing, Captain. No haste el intent signaled. Captain Hannah let out a slow breath. Good. Stand down the main batteries. Keep the point defense web active. They might try to circle back. She turned to another officer. Open a channel on the old mining guild frequency. The one the boy used. She picked up a small, handheld microphone. Her voice, when it came, was not the loud voice of a military captain. It was tired and firm and kind. It was the voice of someone who had come a very long way in Pod 4. The speaker crackled to life. A voice filled the small space, clear and warm. Sanctuary survivors, the voice said. This is Captain Hannah of the Terran relief vessel Vindication. We heard your whisper. There was a slight pause, like she was smiling. Prepare for docking. We have room for everyone. The voice from the warship hung in the air of the pod. We have room for everyone. The words did not make sense at first. They were too big, too kind for the small, dark place. Mina was the first to move. Her training kicked in. Okay, she said, her own voice sounding strange. Okay, everyone. Secure loose items. Strap in tight. They're going to bring us in. The others just stared, their faces blank with shock and exhaustion. Jay began to help Ella tighten her straps. Her movements slow and careful outside. The huge warship moved with a gentle grace that seemed impossible for its size. It turned, presenting a broad section of its hull. A large door, like a metal mouth, slid open silently. Inside was a well-lit docking bay, not a dark weapons hold. A gentle tractor beam, glowing a soft blue, reached out from the bay. It wrapped around Pod 4. There was no jolt, no sudden movement. The pod was lifted smoothly and pulled toward the open door. The scarred hull of the Vindication passed by the viewport, close enough to touch. Then they were inside. The giant door closed behind them with a deep, final thud. Lights came on, bright and clean. The pod settled onto the deck with a soft bump. Through the viewport, they could see people waiting. They were not soldiers in heavy armor. They wore simple gray and blue uniforms. Some held medical kits. Others pushed floating stretchers. One woman held a tray of steaming cups. The pod's hatch hissed open. Fresh air washed in. It was cool and clean, without the stale, recycled taste they had lived with for days. A woman with a kind face and a medic's badge stepped forward. Easy now, she said. Take your time. Let us help you. One by one, the survivors of Sanctuary Station stumbled out of the pod. Their legs were weak. They blinked in the bright light. The medics wrapped them in warm blankets. They were given cups of sweet, hot tea. A man with an engineer's patch gently checked Ella's breathing and nodded, hooking her up to a portable respirator with a better air mix. Mina stepped out last, clutching June's device. She looked around the docking bay. It was enormous, and it was mostly empty. She saw the outlines on the floor where giant racks for missiles or fighters should have been. But the racks were gone. In their place were rows of simple cots, storage units, and large water tanks. This was not a warship's main bay. It had been changed. It had been gutted. Captain Hannah walked into the bay. She was shorter than Mina expected. Her calm eyes took in the scene. She walked directly to Mina and GA. Engineer Mina?
Botanistia.
Hannah asked. Mina just nodded, unable to speak. I'm Captain Hannah. Welcome aboard the Vindication. She looked at the scared, tired faces around her. You are safe here. You are all safe. Jay found her voice, small and cracked. The others? The pods? We have 6 pods on board already, Hannah said. Our scout drones are sweeping the nebula for the rest. We will find every one of you. That is why we are here. Why? Mina asked, the word bursting out of her. The council said no one was coming. The order said, non-retrievable. Hannah's mouth became a thin line. The council gave an order. Humanity gave a different one. She gestured to the vast, converted bay around them. You see, the Vindication is not a warship on patrol. Not anymore. She is a relief vessel. We listen to the old channels, the forgotten bands, the ones the bureaucrats think are dead. When we heard your signal, we came. It's what we do. Min, the communications officer, approached. He held a small, damaged data drive. Captain, we pulled this from the pod's log. It's Commander Lee's final station log. And we found this in the debris field. He handed Hannah a small, burned photograph from the station. It was a picture of Lee with his engineering team all smiling. Hannah took it. She looked at it for a long moment, then handed it to Mina. He died well. He saved you. We will remember him. A young crewman approached GA. Ma'am? The Selvan. She is asking for you. GA hurried to where Ella lay on a stretcher. The Selvan opened her large eyes. She was connected to clean, quiet machines. Gia, ela vispirid. The air. It does not hurt. You're going to be okay? GA said, tears finally spilling over. Ella's hand moved weakly to touch the data crystal still clutched in JS' fist. The custodian. His song. Is it safe? GA nodded, crying and smiling. Yes, it's safe. We all are. Captain Hannah watched them. She turned to Mina. Your comms technician. Junio. Is he? Mina shook her head. He stayed. To keep the signal sending. Hannah nodded slowly. Then his was the most important job of all. Without that signal, we would have been searching an entire nebula for whispers. He led us right to you. She put a hand on Mina's shoulder. Get some rest. Get some real food. Your job is done. We have you now. As Mina was led away with the others, she looked back. She saw crew members helping an old man from another pod. She saw a child being carried, already asleep on a crewman's shoulder. She saw the busy, quiet efficiency of a ship whose only mission was to collect the lost. The Vindication was not a warship. It was a lifeboat, an angry, howling lifeboat that tore through the void to save them. Mina looked down at the green light in her hand, and for the first time since the alarm sounded, she took a full, deep, unafraid breath. The mess hall of the Vindication was not beautiful. It was a long room with plain metal tables bolted to the floor. The lights were bright and functional, but to the people from Sanctuary Station, it was the most wonderful place they had ever seen. They sat at the tables, wearing borrowed clothes that were a little too big or too small. In front of them were plates of real food, not nutrition bars. There was soft bread, a warm stew with vegetables, and cups of cold, sweet juice. They ate slowly, as if they had forgotten how. Mina sat with GA and Ella. Ella was still weak, but color had returned to her blue skin. She sipped a broth made specially for her species. Around them, the low murmur of talking and the clink of utensils was a gentle, living sound. It was the sound of safety. The door to the mess hall opened. Captain Hannah entered, followed by a few of her officers. The room quieted. All eyes turned to her. She did not stand on a stage. She simply walked to the middle of the room. I will not keep you long, Hannah said, her voice carrying easily. I know you are tired. Our medics tell me you will all recover. We have now retrieved 9 pods. 43 survivors. Our drones are still looking. We will look until there is no nebula left to search. A man at the back, Choi, raised a hand. His voice was less harsh now, just tired. Captain, thank you. But why? Why risk your ship for us? The council wrote us off. Hannah nodded. They did. They see numbers, resources, strategic value. She looked around at the faces, human and Selvan. We see something else. A long time ago, humans went to the stars in fragile ships. When one was in trouble, the others would turn around, no matter the danger, to go and help. It is a stubborn idea, that no one gets left behind. The council's order told us to leave you. Our humanity told us to turn around. She gestured to the walls of the ship. The Vindication is slow. It is loud. It drinks fuel like water. But it has room. We took out the missiles and the fighters to make space for cots and water tanks. We are not here to fight a war. We are here to win a different kind of battle. GA stood up. She held the Selvan data crystal in her hand. She walked over to where the Selvan survivors sat together. She knelt beside the custodian's granddaughter, a young female named Lyra. "Your custodian gave me this," Jie said, her voice clear. "He said to carry you with us." She placed the crystal in Lyra's hand. Then, from her pocket, she took something else. A small, sealed specimen jar. Inside was a single, delicate plant with a tiny purple flower. It was a Selvon bloom, one she had saved from the lab. "It lived," Jie said, showing the jar to everyone. "In the dark of the cargo pod with almost no air. It lived, and it bloomed." Lyra took the jar, her large eyes wide. She held it carefully, then looked at Captain Hannah. "Your captain spoke of your human idea, of not leaving people behind." Her voice was soft, but every word was clear. "My grandfather, the custodian, taught us an idea too. He said, to bloom in the dark is the truest form of life. He meant that to stay kind, to stay brave when there is no hope, that is the best thing a soul can do." She looked at the human survivors, then at the weary but determined crew of the Vindication. "We thought we were the ones who had to learn to bloom in the dark. But you humans, you do not accept the dark." She turned the jar, and the little purple flower caught the light. "You hear a whisper from it, and you answer the dark with a howl. You do not just bloom in it. You tear it apart to bring the light in." Silence filled the mess hall. There were no cheers, just a deep, quiet understanding that passed between the two species. They had both learned something new about how to live. Captain Hannah gave a small, respectful bow of her head to Lyra. "We will take you home," she said, "wherever you decide that is." Later, Mina stood at a large observation window. The azure nebula glowed beside them, a beautiful, deadly cloud they had escaped. The stars ahead were clean and sharp. Ga came to stand beside her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Mina said, "they finish the search. Then, I think this big, noisy ship turns toward the next signal. The next whisper on an old channel that no one else is listening to." A low vibration began to thrum through the deck. It was the warship's massive drive powering up. It built slowly, from a hum into that same deep, mournful and powerful howl that had first torn through the void to save them. But it did not sound like a weapon anymore. To Mina and Ga, standing safe and warm inside the strong walls of the ship, it sounded like a promise. It was the sound of the answer, forever moving toward the question. The Vindication angled itself away from the nebula. The howl reached its peak, a defiant song against the quiet of space. Then, with a flash of light that swallowed the stars, the great ship was gone. Not toward war, but toward the next hope, leaving only the echo of its howl hanging in the dark.